to the channel, and welcome to the first obligatory YouTuber tier list video. Today in this video we're going to be ranking some lesser known semi-obscure cars from the late 90s and early 2000s. Just got some really weird looking and polarizing cars. I'm not necessarily basing this on performance. It's going to be kind of a blend of like performance, aesthetics, and just overall appear of the cars. If you don't know who I am, because I am still relatively small, my name's Aubrey, otherwise known as Red Pepper Z. Same thing on Instagram. I haven't plugged my Instagram yet on this channel, but if you look me up there, I'll post a link. But anyway, we have 15 cars here today that we're going to be ranking. Again, these are semi-obscure cars, and there's no real performance-only metric that I'm basing this ranking system off of. So I am also using my iPhone as the microphone, so if this sounds like garbage, I'll work that out in a later video. This is completely experimental, so I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get into the ranking systems. So first car that we're going to be looking at here is this Thunderbird Super Coupe. See, now I absolutely love these cars. These came with, I do have a little set of notes here so I don't get anything wrong about these cars. So these were produced from 89 to 95, and they had a supercharged V6, and they made roughly 200 horsepower. I believe they did come in automatic and manual options. These cars are really cool. They're obscure. They were kind of overshadowed by the later Thunderbirds that had the 4.8 liter V8, but honestly, just straight off the bat, I think this deserves an A tier. I think it's a very cool car. Next up, we have the Chevy SSR. This one is very, very polarizing for a lot of people. It has like very distinctive like early 2000s styling. It came equipped with the 5.3 liter Vortec engine, and then it also came available with the 6 liter LS2 that was, I believe it's the same engine that was in the Pontiac GTO. So this is a very impressive performing car, at least with its drivetrain, because I do also believe it came with the manual T56 option. It has fallen into obscurity. I have seen these done up pretty well. They look very cool, obviously, and of course you get LS power. But I think just because of how ubiquitous LS engines are and basically everything, of course everything that GM made, but also aftermarket swaps, I believe this just kind of deserves a B tier. It's nothing like incredibly special. Next up, what we have to look at here is another kind of obscure car from the early 2000s. It is the Volkswagen Rabbit with the 5-cylinder. I think this is a really, really cool car. It's basically just half of a V10, and if you get the proper intake setup on it and you really kind of give it the beans, it sounds just like an old Gallardo, especially like with the intake noise and stuff. I think it's a very, very cool car. It's not like a ridiculously impressive performer, so for that reason, we're gonna stick it in B. The next thing that we have to look at here is a prototype car. I was gonna stick this in like an honorable mentions, but I do think this was kind of foundational for that late 90s and early 2000s kind of wedgy supercar look. So it's the Vector WX3. So this came with a proprietary 7 liter V8. I believe it was GM derived, and at the time it had an advertised 0 to 60 of 3.3 seconds. I can't remember if this still came with the 2-speed, but this is a very cool car. It's got very like XJ220 styling, so it's cool. I'm gonna throw it an A, even though it's a prototype car, but it's a pretty interesting vehicle. Next up, we have the Subaru SVX. So this is, I feel like it could have had a really, really good potential to be like a people-pleasing performance car. However, Subaru did it pretty dirty with only equipping it in an automatic, if I remember correctly. So obviously, there's better things they could have done. They could have turbocharged it. They could have given it something else pretty interesting, other than a naturally aspirated flat 6 and an automatic transmission. But at the time, this was like more of a luxury car. They were trying to advertise it to more like rich people that were trying to, I don't know, rebel from their parents. So it did come with a 3.3 liter naturally aspirated flat six, as I mentioned before. It was EJ derived, so I'm not sure if it had like oiling issues that we all know that the EJs are very, very prone to. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to throw it in C. Now this one is very, very cool to me. So it's a Geo Tracker. I have always wanted one of these cars. You see them at the beach all the time, you know, here in Florida. They're awesome. Very, very cool cars. Very, very capable. I think they have like a little four banger, but you know, people have done absurd things to them and put in 4G63s and just every ridiculous like small displacement, like high horsepower engine you could ever imagine. So for that reason, I'm gonna give it a B. So now this is something really cool. So this is the Lincoln Mark 8. So this actually had the same 4.6 liter V8 that the Cobras had at the time, the Mustang Cobra. So it was from the SN95. So it wasn't an extremely high horsepower engine, but just the other features that this car came equipped. It came with like an air ride suspension where if you were on the interstate or the highway or whatever, and you're going over 55 miles an hour, the car would actually lower itself, you know, to the ground because it had like this air suspension. So I think that's really, really sick. I'm gonna stick it in A, even though it probably realistically only had about 230 wheel horsepower, if that. Because like it's advertised at 280. I don't know if that's crank or wheel. I'm gonna assume it's probably somewhere. You know, for the benefit of the doubt, let's say it had about 250 wheel horsepower. So cool car. I like this. So the next one that we're going to be looking at is what I believe is a 95 Impala SS. This came equipped with the LT1. Very, very cool car. Huge, just giant lead sled. Very few of these. I think it was only as like a prototype thing, but I think they actually equipped some of these with the T56 for a very limited amount of time. I don't think they ever sold them, but I know for a very limited time these cars did have a T56. I remember watching a Motor Trend thing on it. But regardless, it's a very cool car, rear-wheel drive Impala. LT1. It's nothing like extremely special, so I'm gonna throw it in C. I don't know if it's deserving of a B. You know what? For the LT1's sake, we'll throw it in B. I think it's a really cool car. So the next we have is the Mercedes C230 compressor. This is the coupe version. I think this is an absolutely atrocious car. It's plagued with early 2000s German electrical issues. I actually had one of these. I had the sedan version, so that's why I'm putting it on this list, so I could kind of take out some of my frustration on it by giving it a very, very low score. I know that's petty. I know that is, you know, whatever you want to call it, but I hate this car. The sun visors would, or the sunroofs would leak, and it would just leak completely down into the floorboard, and you would basically fry every single electrical component in this car. The car would brick itself. You would take it to the dealership, and just to diagnose it, it would be thousands of dollars. So these cars suck. They had a 4-cylinder supercharged engine if you got the compressor model, and it was absolutely anemic. So I cannot stand these cars, and every time I see one, I am reminded of how terrible they are. But that leads us to our next car. If you didn't know, this was mine. This little thing I'm using here in the background. That's my 97 Camaro Z28. It's got cam, heads, injectors, whatever done to it. It makes roughly 400 wheel horsepower. I have plenty of videos up on the channel by now of me driving this thing around. You can check it out. But up next, we have the Catfish Camaro. I am not a huge fan of the Catfish. I do like the 93 to 97 cars. That's what I personally have. I think it looks way better than the Catfish. However, the fate of these Catfish was actually pretty sad, because the Z28 models, they were fairly cheap. You know, like obviously they're going to be a little bit less pricey than the Corvettes. So people would buy these cars, especially once they got 7, 8, 19 years old. They would completely chop the car up, take the LS1 out, sell it, and, you know, no one would ever hear from the car again. So these Catfish Z28 Camaros are getting more and more rare by the day, but the base model, it was absolutely subject to the terrible styling that GM had for these cars. I mean, dude, this is coming from a fourth gen owner. These are not like the most fantastic looking cars, especially from the front. I do not. I just don't like them. I'm sorry. I mean, like, of course they still look good from the back. I mean, like, come on, you got to see this is, nice and round. I like it. But the front end, I'm just not a huge Catfish guy. I do think there's a ton of potential for these cars. Like the V6 is like absolutely unkillable. You can put the supercharger from like a Buick on these things and make them absolutely killers. But for that reason, it gets a B tier. It's nothing, or a C tier. It's not anything extremely special unless you had one of the SS versions, or I think, what are they called, the Dick Harrow cars. There's only like 400 some out of them made. Very cool cars, but just the base, it's nothing to write home about. Next up is another pretty ugly car from the early 2000s, but I think these cars have some really, really interesting potential. So this is the first generation Porsche Cayenne. They came with a few different engine options. They came with a 2.6 liter. No, I'm sorry. It had a 3.2 liter V6 that made like 250 horsepower. Nothing impressive. They had a naturally aspirated 4.5 liter V8 that churned out about 350 horse, and then they had a turbo V8 version that was that same 4.5 liter V8, and it made about 450 horsepower. And these cars were all-wheel drive, obviously, and it's a Porsche, so the maintenance isn't the cheapest thing in the world, but I think these cars sound phenomenal. Like just the other day, I was going somewhere, and a white one pulled up next to me, and you could tell it had something done to it. It was the GTS model. I think it was a little bit newer than this one, but like I cracked the window down slightly in my car, and I kind of like looked over at the guy and kind of gave him a thumbs up, and that's just the universal sign. So whenever the light turned green, he kind of sat back for a second. I pulled off just a hair, and then he just floored it from the light. I just heard like the turbo spooling up, and then just this amazing sounding European V8 goes by me. And these things are cheap too. They can be had for way less than $10,000. And obviously maintenance records are something you're going to want to see if you're looking into one of these cars. But I think these have an absolute ton of potential. Obviously, they're very spacious. They're very big cars. They are Porsches, so you can obviously get them serviced, and it's going to take some dedication. But I think these cars have absolutely phenomenal potential, and for that reason, unbelievably, I'm going to put these at A tier just because of my own personal bias. But this is my tier list, so you could do whatever you want. So next up, we have the Mitsubishi Eclipse. I don't know what generation this is, but I think these were the ones from the early 2000s. I think the styling on these cars was very polarizing. The performance metrics weren't extremely impressive. I think the spiders were and I don't think they have aged extremely well. I know they've been in a few movies, and that's kind of like increased their I guess their lack of obscurity. So like more people kind of do recognize these cars, and they do remember them for the early 2000s. But the 3-liter V6 still only made about 200 horsepower, and that was probably at the crank. So it's a bit lackluster in the performance, and I think for the price, I think you could get something way, way better. So for that, I think I'm going to have to throw it in D. It's just nothing, incredibly special. So next up is the Dodge Magnum, actually. See, I think these are pretty cool cars. They did have like a ton of engine options. So they had a 2.6 liter and a 3.5 liter V6. Obviously, those aren't the ones you wanted. The RT model had the 5.7 liter Hemi that we're all familiar with by now. And the SRT8 actually had the 6.1 liter that made a decent amount of power. I mean, obviously this thing is an absolute sled, and I'm sure it's heavier than the Charger just from the amount of glass and everything that went into making this thing. But I think it's a cool car. I don't think it's the coolest thing out there, but I do think it's one of those like obscure things. I've seen people do like modern like 392 front end swaps on them from Chargers, and I think they look okay. I'm not sure what the aftermarket support is on the 6.1 liter again, because like I mostly deal with Chevys, you know. But I do think it's an interesting car, and I'm gonna put it in B tier because I think it's really neat. So next up, this thing I'm gonna tell you right now, it deserves an S tier, and it is the Galant VR4 wagon. I would take this over any Subaru, and I would even take it over an Evo wagon. This thing had the 6A13 TT 2.5 liter twin turbocharged six cylinder, like V6, and it was awesome. So it only made about 250 horsepower, but still, in 1997, from that low of a displacement V6, I think this is such a cool car. Obviously, it's a VR4, so it's all-wheel drive. I'm pretty sure it came to option with a manual. I absolutely love this car. I'm going to tell you right now, S tier. Absolutely, like, bar none, hands down, S tier car. Very, very cool. I have driven a 1991 3000 GT VR4. One of the coolest cars I've ever driven. I tell my buddy who owns it at like almost every single time. I was like, dude, if your car was in the condition that mine was in, I would take it over my car all day long. It is such a unique car. Now, I think the 3000 GT in its own right it's one of the more obscure JDM cars, especially the GTO here, and I think it's an amazing car. I feel like it gets really overshadowed, especially like in media and stuff. I think they're beautiful cars. Lastly, we have the venerable PT Cruiser. A early 2000s and late 90s freaky car tier list cannot be complete without the presence of the PT Cruiser. So this thing had a couple engine options. I think they were all inline fours. So you had a 1.6 liter inline four and a 2 liter inline four. Obviously, those weren't the ones you wanted. The two different engine options that you had for the 2.4 liter inline four was known as the Turbo Light. So, and it made, roughly 180 horsepower, and then the actual true, like, GT Turbo model made roughly 200 horsepower. And that is a cool, fun car. It's very interesting. Again, it has that very, like, indicative of the early 2000s styling. It's not a super performer, but, I'm sure it could be fun. These things have, like, a cult-like following. Even now, people still have, like, entire meets dedicated to these cars. So I think, in that respect, I think they're very cool. So I'm going to put this in A tier up with the Super Coupe, the Vector, the Lincoln, and the Cayenne. I feel kind of bad about putting the 4th gen down there in C tier, but again, this was just the base model car. I wasn't necessarily referring specifically to the Z28 or the SS models, but it is what it is. But we've made it to the end of the tier list. If you like this video, let me know. I know we kind of rapid fire bang those out, but if you want to see another tier list like this, drop whatever suggestions you think I should do. If you want to see like a JDM tier list or something else that is extremely overplayed, and like I said at the beginning of the video, just very obligatory for really any YouTuber these days, let me know. I will be providing a link to my Instagram and stuff if you want to hit me up in the description. So go check out everything else on the channel, and if you do like this style video, let me know, and I'll definitely kind of be looking into doing more things like this in the future. But again, thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next vid.